So the next group of organelles, the organelles that are involved in energy conversion. There are two organelles within this group, the mitochondria and the chloroplasts. The mitochondria are found in all cells. All living cells have mitochondria. What keeps them alive? It's what fuels these cells to be alive. Mitochondria are organelles that carry out cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is the process of a chemical reaction that goes on within each of your cells to generate energy out of the food you've eaten and out of the oxygen you've just taken in. We're going to talk about this whole process in detail in one chapter coming up. What does a mitochondria look like? There are two internal compartments to a mitochondria. The central compartment is called the mitochondrial matrix. Just like the nucleus had a central compartment or component that we call the nucleoplasm, the mitochondrial matrix is what houses the mitochondrial DNA. Yes, the mitochondria has its own DNA. So there are two places within the cell that you'll find DNA. Within the nucleus, which houses most of your DNA, and here in the mitochondria, which houses a fraction of your DNA, the DNA that you've inherited from your mom only. So the mitochondrial matrix has embedded within it the mitochondrial DNA, ribosomes, so obviously they're producing proteins over here, and many enzymes that catalyze the reactions of cellular respiration. Outside the mitochondrial matrix is an intermembrane space. Okay, so here is the matrix, and outside of that is the intermembrane space. So you probably guessed the intermembrane space is that region that exists between the outer membrane of the mitochondria and an inner membrane of the mitochondria. The inner membrane of the mitochondria is highly folded. Look at this, the number of folds. You can see them here too. And this structure, having two layers that are separated by a region, is very important to allows mitochondria to carry out its energy generating conversion process. Okay. The other organelle is said was the chloroplast. You'll find the chloroplast only in plant cells. Okay. The chloroplast is somewhat like the mitochondria. It also has, so when we go back, it also has an inner and an outer membrane. It has a matrix, and within that matrix are embedded various structures that are important in harvesting light, in collecting the photons of light. And again, once we have a chapter dedicated to this that will show us how exactly the light that is captured by these structures within the chloroplast generate energy. Okay, I asked you to read about the endosymbiont theory that tells you the evidence we have to show that the mitochondria and chloroplast, two different organelles, were formerly small prokaryotes. They were formerly small cells of the prokaryotic kind that began living within larger cells, and soon after they began living with them, they became an integral part of those cells that they started living in. Okay. The next functional categorization of organelles is the cytoskeleton and the cell surfaces. The cytoskeleton is what keeps the internal structure of the cell so that the cell just doesn't collapse on itself. Okay? The cytoskeleton, just like the framework of a building, it keeps a building held up. The cytoskeleton includes three different kinds of structures. They are microfilaments, intermediate filaments, and microtubules. What do they look like? Here's a picture of the three different types of cytoskeleton molecules. The microtubule, the intermediate filament, and the microfilament. They're not colored like this in your cells. These are pictures that have been taken after staining or coloring the different fibers so that we can visualize them. They're just for better viewing. The pictures were taken by a fluorescence microscope, and so these are not living cells. You see a nucleus stained blue in these cells, whereas the nucleus in this group of cells is stained orange. So obviously the nucleus is not blue in some cells and orange in others. It's just the stain that was used to color these two kinds of cells. Okay. The filament, the cytoskeleton over here, is the green fibrous thing here, the green fibrous thing, and in this case the red fibrous things. Okay, the filaments that make up the cytoskeleton are of three different kinds based on their structures. Look, the microtubule is a helical structure. The diameter of the helix here is 25 nanometers. The intermediate filament is smaller than the microtubule. Its diameter is only 10 nanometers, and the microfilament, very aptly named micro, is the smallest of them all. Its diameter is only 7 nanometers. Okay, structurally they are all proteins. So this is tubulin protein, this is fibrous protein, and here's protein called actin that make up microtubule, intermediate filament, and microfilament respectively. You think about these checkpoint questions, the answers to this and all of the checkpoint questions you will find in the notes section of your PowerPoint slides. Cilia and flagella. They are locomotor appendages that are made up of the cytoskeletal components called microtubules. These are that hair-like structures that we saw in the eukaryotic cell, the picture of the eukaryotic cell. Flagella are longer than cilia. They propel the cell by a whip-like motion. The cilia work more like oars of a boat. Okay. So while there are differences between the structures of flagella and cilia, one being longer than the other, they have a common mechanism of movement. Okay, there's a rotor at the base of both cilia and flagella that causes them to move, but we don't need to know the details. Okay, here's a picture of cilia, and these cilia are on the cells that line our respiratory tract. They form an important, or they play an important function in our innate immunity. They are responsible for sweeping out foreign bodies that might want to find their way into our lungs. Recognize this guy? This is a sperm, human sperm, and it is characterized by this long whip-like flagellum. Something you'll find in bacterial cells as well. The sperm cell is one of the smallest eukaryotic cells. See how many times you have to magnify it to be able to view it. Then we come to the extracellular matrix of animal cells. It's the supporting structure. It's the framework that's outside a cell. So a cell is supported or held together not only by the cytoskeleton that's within the cell, but also by the structures that are outside the cell. Okay, and that is what makes up the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix, or ECM as it is often known for short, may attach to the cell. The proteins over here are not always free floating. You see here the extracellular matrix components, the collagen fiber, glycoproteins are attached to an intermembrane protein called integrin via a connecting glycoprotein. So components of the extracellular fluid, or the ECM, can either be free-floating or attached to the cell via such structures. No cell is present in isolation. Cells adhere, interact, communicate with their neighboring cells, and they do so through specialized junctions that exist between cells. Okay, there are three kinds of specialized junctions that you will find within cells. The names are suggestive of their functions. The tight junctions between cells are what holds the cells together in a very tight, leak-proof manner. The anchoring junctions, the tight junctions, anchoring junctions are what hold neighboring cells together so that you have strong tissues. The gap junction, again as the name suggests, is what allows ions and small molecules to flow from cell to cell because there are gaps in it. You see the small molecules moving from cell to cell. So cell walls, which you'll see in plant cells, not in animal cells, are what protects and provides skeletal support that keeps the plant upright. So we already talked about two kinds of organelles that support the cell. That was the cytoskeleton and the extracellular matrix. And here's a third type, the cell wall, which you'll find only in plant cells. See the rigid plant cell wall made up of cellulose is what makes plant cells stronger than animal cells. Plant cells, again, don't live in isolation. They are communicating with each other, and their junctions here are what are called plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata allow plant tissues to share water, nourishment, and chemicals. Okay, finally, a quick review. So there are 4 groups of organelles within eukaryotic cells, and this grouping is based on their function. The first group of organelles are those that are involved in genetic control, such as the nucleus. The second group is the one that are the organelles involved in manufacturing, distribution, and breakdown of materials. That is the ER, the Golgi, the lysosomes, etc. The third group are the organelles that are involved in energy processing, which is the mitochondria and the chloroplast. And finally, the fourth group of organelles are those that are involved in structural support, movement, and intercellular communication, such as the cytoskeleton, the ECM, and in the case of the plant cells, the cell wall. All right, you can think about this question yourself and see if you can answer it. All right, this concludes our chapter 4. I will be available in class to answer any questions to answer any questions. So see you there.